So we're going to be very serious this episode because we started posting clips and Khailea does not want us acting weird in the clips. So I'm just going to stare directly at the camera the entire time and never look away.
Can we actually move or?
You are allowed to move,
okay.
but just, oh my God, you guys. No, it's just, let's just acknowledge that for men and women, it's different. You know, you guys don't even look in the mirror. You just come on and you're ready to go.
Clearly.
Oh,
that is a stereotype that if I've ever heard one.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? I look in the mirror every morning.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I do.
Really?
There's a mirror in the bathroom. I mean, whether I like it or not.
God, I don't do this podcast for the abuse. I don't.
Wow.
If I want to be abused, I can just go upstairs and hang out with my family. I don't need it from you guys.
Huh? Tell me.
Yeah. I know.
A face like this just happens.
Yeah. Your beard
takes time and effort.
Yeah.
Look at the beard. Look at my colleagues. The beards all over the place.
That's true.
Mine nice and short, and thank my father for that.
Anyway, happy Hanukkah. We are recording this. Tonight is the second night of Hanukkah. Yep. And we have not lit the menorah yet, but we will be doing that as soon as we're finished recording.
I lit mine.
Okay, good for you. Well, you're 3 hours ahead, so that's good. Yeah.
I'm an overachiever. You guys are you guys are slackers, just slacking.
California slackers. What can we say?
I have an interesting question. This has nothing to do with the topic we're covering.
I will determine if it's an interesting question or not.
Oh my God.
You have a question. You have a question.
Why am I here? No, so in our family, the custom was always that my husband or my father lit menorah, and the women and all the boys. And when I was a little kid, I would light menorah too, but I haven't in a long time because my boys light and my husband lights. But this year I have felt kind of an urge to light the menorah, and I didn't last night. It was the first night last night, but is there something, is there something? Do you have a feeling about it?
This is the United States of America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. No one is going to come crashing through your door and arrest you for lighting the menorah. Now, do women light the menorah in Hasidic worlds? No.
Right.
They don't light the menorah. That's a short answer to your question. Whatever you do in the privacy of your own home, whatever you feel right. But you asked a question about the women light menorahs in Chabad. The answer is no, they don't.
But one of the things I noticed is that since my father-in-law passed away, my mother-in-law lights the menorah in the house.
That she's supposed to.
Right. So I was just thinking why.
Thank God your husband's still alive.
No, I thank God.
Thank God your husband is alive. He'll be alive for many, many more years.
Please God.
Yes.
But why do I need to wait for like 120 years?
Why?
I can start now.
Okay. I think we answered the question. Let's go on to the topic at hand.
Wow. Okay. So that was the end.
Why did you bring this up at the last end? This question you should have brought up together with that comedian you had on.
Oh my
What's her name? Judy
Gold.
That's a Judy Gold podcast question.
I think
that we're going to be dealing with.
Judy Gold would have an opinion on that.
No, Emily would.
Could you say no women ever lit menorahs? Of course,
women light. Many women light menorahs.
Well, lit the menorahs, but when our custom is that the men and boys light the menorahs, the girls light Shabbos candles.
Okay,
it's
fine.
Everybody has them. It's just drunk.
You get your candles every week. Let the boys get their candles once a year. I guess eight times a year.
No, I get a lot of pleasure out of watching my kids, and it's beautiful. So I'm not miserable. I was just thinking about it. But anyway, I'm happy for all my friends who do light menorah. All the women, good for you.
So that was the interesting question that Khailea had. Great.
Yeah, but we're going to take a hard turn right now into a very, very serious topic, actually.
Yeah. So. All right, so I'm just gonna do a quick monologue here before we get into it. So just very quickly, so something happened this week that I as soon as I read about this, I texted Khailea and said we have to talk about this. So the issue is a very light topic. We're gonna talk about capital punishment.
Yeah.
And capital punishment has always been a topic that I've been very torn on. It's probably the issue that the political issue that I've been most sort of wishy-washy on. There's obviously there are horrible things that happen, and there have to be ramifications for certain actions that occur. But on the flip side, obviously, court systems are made up of people, and mistakes are made. And so you can't have a mistake made in a situation where someone's life hangs in the balance. So this is an issue that I've always struggled with, being able to firmly plant a flag on one side or the other. But this week, something happened, and I'm sure most people who are listening probably heard about this, that helped me make a final decision in my mind on the issue. And that was what happened on the New York subway system earlier in the week, with that person that set that woman on fire on the train. And she was killed. And at this point, it doesn't seem there's any question. There's video of the event. There's eyewitnesses. There's no question who did it. And I saw this happen, and it just really solidified in my mind the idea that, and obviously in New York State, there's no death penalty, so he won't. It's not an option. He'll probably get life in jail or whatever. But he definitely will not get the death penalty. But and in my mind, this is such a clear case of if this person isn't sentenced to death, there's no justice. Like, there is absolutely, in my mind, is absolutely crystal clear. The only justice in this case is for this person to receive the death penalty. And so I was texting Kyle about this earlier, and I just said, we've got to talk to your dad this week about this topic, because it's just, I won't say that I was radicalized by the event, but to a certain degree, I probably was. And that it just, I just don't understand how any justice can be meted out in this circumstance without this person being sentenced to death. And so I wanted to talk to the rabbi about what Judaism says about capital punishment, and if it's allowed, under what circumstances it's allowed, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to give that monologue introduction into the topic. And I guess if you guys have any thoughts on the event that happened this week or anything else, I just wanted to kind of start off there, because I thought it was it's what made me insist that we talk about this topic this week.
Well, it's not an easy topic, and certainly the case that you brought up is a heinous crime. There's not, for sure nothing to talk about. Everybody agrees to that. I'll just start off this discussion by saying you cannot equate the American justice system and the Jewish Bibles, Judaism's biblical system. They're two extremely different types of systems. That's why wherever we're going to talk about, historically in Judaism, whether it's biblically, whether it's rabbinical, you cannot equate the two. So we can't take a leap and say, well, you know what, 3,000 years ago we acted one way. Today in America we should act the same way, because we'll get into the details. So
you're saying it's two separate issues.
It's two separate issues, completely two separate issues.
Like what Jewish law says, and then what we do here in our country.
Yes.
Okay.
There's no question that Judaism, biblically, there is this issue of capital punishment. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The Torah early on says that when Noah was after the flood and he came out and God told him to repopulate the world, he warned them very, 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 very strongly. You know what? I want you to grow and to do whatever you want, eat whatever you want. However, your blood, which belongs to the souls, I will demand. Of every beast will I demand it. But of every man, that of his brother, I will demand the soul of the man, which means that if you take the soul of the man, I'm going to demand your soul. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. I think that's pretty clear.
Where is that?
This is in Genesis chapter
9.
number 9. This is way before any justice system was established. God told Noah, because the generation of the flood, murder was rampant, God said to him, I'm just letting you know that, again, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. Why? And he gives a reason. For in the image of God, he made man.
Right.
Okay? So just clearly, God is saying to him that when the justice system will be established and someone commits murder, the punishment for murder, that's just for murder, is going to be the death penalty.
Right.
I'm going to demand your soul. Okay. So that establishes it. That biblically, God wanted to, there's a justice system, someone commits murder, the punishment for that is going to be death. Now, it doesn't say how, what, when, and where. It doesn't give any of the details over here. And he doesn't say whether man should put the person to death or where he himself will put the person to death. He doesn't enumerate that over here. He just gives you a general statement that I'm going to demand the soul of the murderer.
Right.
Now, how he's going to get that soul, that's still up to debate. Later on, when the Jews come out of Egypt and Moses then establishes and gives the Torah to the Jewish people, it's clear that there are going to be some violations that are going to be, the punishment for those violations are going to be the death penalty.
Right.
A murder is 1, adultery is 2, violating the Sabbath is 3, and a number of other ones.
Kidnapping is kidnapping.
Kidnapping and using the man. I mean, you have to kidnap him and use him. I mean, make him work for you.
Right.
That's a capital punishment. Striking your parents is a capital punishment. So there's a number of different, sins that you can be liable for punishment. Idolatry was a big one. There's a number of different issues in idolatry, and these were all capital offenses. Fine. Okay. But it becomes very clear early on in the Talmud when you start to, unpack what this means. It's almost impossible to put someone to death. Almost impossible. Number one, we do not accept circumstantial evidence. So
the Torah,
the Torah. Well, I'm talking about now. I'm not talking about America. I'm talking about
biblical.
We're standing in biblical times, in the times of the temple. The rabbis, it had to be at least the minimum number of rabbis that heard a capital case was 23. Some had to be 71. The Bezdin in the high court in Jerusalem, but most cases were heard by 23 justices. That's it. The justices were the lawyers. The justices were the prosecutors. The justices were the one that gave a final, verdict.
And if it was heard by 23 judges, does that
Correct.
mean that they would have to be unanimous to give someone capital punishment?
That is a great question, Jay. As a matter of fact, counter to what you just said, if they unanimously convicted him, he was set free.
Yeah.
There had to be, of the 23, there had to be some that voted to acquit him.
Right.
Voted to acquit him. If it 23-0, the guy would go free. The rationale behind that is because if you had such a complete verdict, meant that you really didn't hear this case well. You didn't hear the case well. Meaning that, you sat there, you said, hey, you know what? The guy was in the subway, whatever it was, he burned. Okay, guilty. Okay, that just proves, because you had 23-0, just proves that you didn't take this case seriously. You already had adjudicated the case before any of the evidence was presented to you. Because I promise you that if 23 different minds or 71, certainly there's going to be 1 or 2 guys that are going to say, no, this could not have happened the way it happened. And they would argue the case and then apply the verdict. But if 23-0, the guy goes free.
That's so fascinating. I feel like there's no other justice system that would implement such a...
Because it's some cases are so open and shut. Right. They didn't want that to happen.
Right.
They wanted you to be serious. They wanted you to listen to the cases, and they wanted you to act vigorously. Because let's take a case of murder. Okay, so you had to have 2 witnesses. Okay. Right. 2 male witnesses. I'm sorry. 2 witnesses that came to the courts and testified. Now, this is what they testified. They testified that prior to the murder, the premeditated murder, they warned the murderer.
Right.
They both of them warned the murderer that if you go through with this act of murdering the victim, the punishment is going to be capital punishment.
Right.
They're going to put you to death. The murderer acknowledges that he heard it. Okay, think about this for a second. The murderer acknowledges that he heard the warning.
Right.
Nonetheless, he goes ahead with the murder. The two witnesses have to see the murder. Right. Not they heard. Even in the case, there's a famous case where they saw A chasing B into a building with a knife. They warned him. They ran into the building. Next thing you know, A is walking out of the building with blood dripping from his knife. They go in there, B is dead. Could not convict them because they did not see the murder.
So that's it. So essentially, that means that no crime of passion could ever result in capital punishments.
Absolutely. If you did it without any warning, without any witnesses, even if you came and admitted it, you confessed. You went to the court and says, "I killed, my lover." Too bad. I mean, they could do things to you. Don't get me wrong. Then we'll talk about the punishment when you can't put him to death legally. But under this, first of all, we don't believe you.
Right.
No person makes themselves into a wicked person. It's a general rule. So your confession doesn't mean anything.
Oh.
Doesn't mean anything. Now, what happens if they see that you are the murderer, but they can't put you to death? So the king had what we called extrajudicial powers. So the king, in order to keep order in the country, could do things to you. He could have you killed. But that rarely ever happened. Rarely ever happened. Now, let's talk just for a second about why there was capital punishment. Why would it be allowed?
What
was the purpose of capital punishment?
Right.
So there's three reasons for capital punishment. Number one is the punishment. Like Jay said before, passionately, and he did it perfectly, said before, that there's got to be a price to pay for such an act. And the Torah admits that if you took someone's life, if you desecrated the Sabbath, even though you're thinking about desecrating the Sabbath, why? Because it's a complete disavowal of Judaism. Mm-hmm. If you go out there and you desecrate the Sabbath, which proclaims that God runs the world, it's an offshoot of idolatry, really.
Right.
Or you profess a belief in another deity, or you steal, you commit adultery. There's a punishment to be paid for this. Meaning you got to be punished. Okay, that's number one. Number two, on a much more spiritual sense, it's not only a punishment, but it's an atonement.
Right.
Every sin that a Jew does, from the Torah, needs an atonement. Some are easy to atone for. Let's say, for example, if one day you missed prayer, you missed a davening mincha. Okay? So what you have to do is you have to admit that you did it. You have to have a regret. Say, sorry that I missed it. And I make a commitment that from now on, I'm never going to miss doing the prayer of mincha or putting on tefillin or whatever that.
Right.
That's easy. I mean, that's simple. You have to mean it. It's got to be sincere and authentic. God knows that, but you're forgiven. You have atonement. In these cases of murder and others, your atonement is just not a confession. Just you can't sit down and say, hey, you know what? I'm so sorry I killed this person and I'll never do it again. Well, you're right. You'll never do it again. That's for sure. You'll never do it again. But the only way you will achieve atonement is when you are put to death.
Right.
That is your atonement. Now, if they don't put you to death, you still have this mark on you.
Right.
So you could somehow get out of like we said before, if 23 voted clear, we know you're the murderer. You're the murderer. But because technically there was a technical issue here that we all convicted you, so you walk free, but you're not atoned.
You're not.
The sin goes with you.
Uh-huh.
The sin sticks with you till you die.
See, so what's different already is that this is all based on an idea that there is a divine punishment involved, right? So there's only one, the punishment that we have here from the courts or jail or whatever is one part, but the second part is the divine punishment, which is more important in a way.
Exactly.
Right.
The whole idea here is that we have faith.
Right.
Think about you're taking someone's life for idolatry.
Yeah.
I mean, really? I mean, a guy goes to the Home Depot, carves himself out a little idol, puts it on the table, and starts to pray to it.
Right.
I mean, really?
Yeah.
I mean, who did he harm?
Right.
He didn't do harm to society. Yes, he did. He harmed the Jewish society by bringing the wrath of God upon them. Mm-hmm. And God is angry now. And when God is angry, he starts to withhold rain and withhold this. So we have to eradicate the evil within us. Right. Okay? So there's number 2. And number 3, it's a deterrent.
Okay.
Number 3 is a deterrent. Meaning what is a deterrent? So I'm just going to quote from a very unusual case.
Okay.
Extremely unusual. This is not only a case of where the guy did something, it is preemptive. I mean, imagine this. We are going to put someone to death even before he committed a capital offense.
Oh.
And that is the case of the rebellious son.
Okay.
So when you have a son that's a thief, that's a glutton and a drunk, and the parents, he's incorrigible, and the parents don't know what to do with him. He's called in Hebrew a ben soer mara, a rebellious son. They bring him to court. They testify in court that this is our son, doesn't listen to us, stole our money, drinks, eats, he's a glutton, he's a this, he's a that, A, B, C, and D. The Torah says you take this kid, and he's a kid. Right. He's not 40 years old. He's a kid.
Oh, my God.
You take this kid, and he's not 6 either. Teenage kid.
Teenagers.
You take this kid, and you stone him. Now, when I say stone him, not the Bob Dylan, we all must get stoned. We're not talking about that kind of stoning.
You're talking about the Life of Brian stoning.
The stoning when they threw big boulders on him, okay? And the Torah says about this case, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about this case. The Torah says...
I always thought this was such a weird part of
the Torah. It's a very, very strange.
Very strange.
He says, and our son is a wayward and rebellious. He does not hearken to our voice. He's a glutton and a drunkard. All the men of the city shall pelt him with stones, and he shall die. Now here's it. And here's the key. And you shall remove the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear, and they shall fear. So the key is that after you do this, you put out a proclamation all over town that in Beersheba, on this and this day, and this hour, we stoned this and this particular person because, and we want you to know that if you fall into this category, you're next.
Wow.
So there was a deterrent to a kid that didn't do anything. Now, that's the bad news. Right. The good news is this never happened.
Right.
The Talmud says that this case of a rebellious son never took place. Why? Because the circumstances were so far-fetched, meaning the father and the mother both had to be able to walk. They both had to be able to talk. They both had to be able to hear. They both had to be able to this. They both had to that. He had to be a certain age. He couldn't be older. He couldn't be younger. He had to eat a certain amount of meat. He had to drink a certain amount of wine. Their voices had to be the same because he doesn't listen to our voice, meaning that our voice. So imagine a father and a mother voice the same.
No.
The details were so many that it never happened.
So it's only here.
But why does he put it here?
Right.
He puts it in here because as a deterrent.
Right.
To say, hey, you know what? That if someone does something like this, we're going to put you to death. Ir Nidachas is another one. A complete city of destruction where majority of the city worshipped an idol, and there's witnesses that they did it. The whole city is destroyed. Never happened. Here in Nidachas never happened because the circumstances are so far-fetched, and you have to be witnesses again, have to come, have to warn the city, everybody. The city goes, yes, we know they're going to put us to death, and yet we don't care. We're going to worship this idol.
Right.
So it doesn't happen.
Interesting.
It doesn't happen. The Talmud says, I'll give you a chance, Jay, when I'm giving just 1 second. The Talmud says that the rabbis say that if a court puts to death one person in 7 years, and another opinion is 70 years, it's called a destructive court.
Right.
So this is just...
Which means it very rarely happened. Yeah.
Very rarely.
So this question might be far too broad, but I want to ask it and just see if there's a concise answer to it. What, from the biblical perspective, what is the definition of justice?
The justice, I would say in Hebrew, the word is tzedek. We normally go tzedek tirdof. You should pursue justice. What does that mean? In other words, it's righteousness. Justice is doing the right thing, meaning that when two people adjudicate a case, you need to do the right thing. Means everything within your power as judges, you need to get to the bottom of this. Understanding full well that judges are human, they'll make mistakes, They'll mishear things. You know, you can get a smart guy to defend himself, and and you bring in crooked arguments, clever crooked arguments. So justice in Judaism is doing the right thing. Now, do we always do the right thing? Again, we're human beings. I mean, we sometimes make mistakes, and and justice is not always served. But that's, I would think, if you wanted to really describe what justice was in Judaism, it's doing the right thing.
It's interesting that you're not saying something that I would assume you would say, and that I struggle with, but I think it's important to say in Judaism. Like, justice is also about God and what God wants us to do and what God says is right and what God says is the right way to be, because it's not just a moral choice that we make on our own, right? It's not like I'm walking down the street and it's like choose your own moral adventure, right? There's like a prescription for what justice and morals are, and we pursue. When we say tzedek, tzedek tirdof, it's not, a nice quote that we should have on a Ruth Bader Ginsburg flyer. It's like, it's actually something that is divinely inspired.
Well, that is what
and divinely carried out.
Means. That. Yeah, righteousness means to do the right thing. How do you adjudicate doing the right thing?
Right.
So there's a system.
Right.
There's a system. And this system are based upon the precepts of the Torah. Right. That's inherent in righteousness. Right. Righteousness is not a man-made concept. Right. It's not like what we think righteousness is in day one. Righteousness is not in 20 years from now.
Right.
Righteousness
is
That's
why I'm
something that is based upon not morals and ethics that are subjective. There's an objective morality that is based upon the Torah and its mitzvahs. Yeah. But even with that said, that morality has to be, expressed through human beings.
Right.
Through human beings. God is not going to come for every case. As a matter of fact, there's times in the Talmud when God does appear through what they call a bat kol, a heavenly voice, and the opponents of the bat kol say, "Lo bashamayim hi."
I know
the Torah was not given.
But we should do that story once. We should do that on an episode.
So we have to sit as judges, human beings, listen to the testimony. We have a system, and the system guides us. But ultimately, the decision is going to be made by 23 or 71 human beings.
The reason that I mentioned, before you jump in, Jay, the reason I mentioned the God part is because part of the story that Jay brought up about the woman on the subway being burnt alive and whatever, is the other part of the story is that there were so many people standing around. There was even a police officer. There were people videotaping it. There were people and the idea that morality is somehow born out of, the air or something that you just, what feels right to us. That story more than anything really drove home to me that actually there is an objective morality, and standing around watching a person burn to death is pretty immoral. And yes, there are people who are scared. All the arguments are true, but to stand with your phone and videoing and recording while somebody is burning to death, there's so much more to it. And it reminds me of the generation of Noah, the generation of the, all the evil generations that we learn about in the Torah. It's this kind of behavior, I think that actually makes the murder even worse. It just shows the degradation of society in a way that we just don't understand what justice and morality are. Is that, do you think that?
I think that's another angle to the story. I think that's very disturbing as well, for sure. But there's one other thing I wanted to talk about with the murder that I think is interesting in this context, though. And so let's just compare this to Brian Anderson's murder, who was murdered by the Mangione, that kid. Right. So, in a lot of murders, a lot of crimes in general, there are mitigating circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Even in that murder of Brian Anderson, which is there is no excuse. In Mangione's mind, he's obviously insane. He felt like there was a reason to do it. There is no justification for it, and I feel like he should probably get the same punishment as this guy who burned the woman alive. But in his mind, it was a mitigating circumstance. to this guy who burnt the woman alive on the train, this is just he's purely a sadist. Clearly, there was no potential justification that is imaginable for what he did. There's not even just the thinnest veneer of what could be considered a justification. And so I think that's why in my mind, this was such a unique case, because there is no even patina of what could be considered justification for what happened. It's just, he just wanted to do this.
Before we go, we should switch over to talking about how Judaism looks at our modern day justice system. But just to finish off on biblical law, if 23 judges all agree, and then he can't be convicted, is it just a majority rule then? Majority rules. Okay.
It has to be like majority plus one.
Right.
If it's like 12-11, no.
Okay.
13-10.
Okay. And then
and just to add that there may be circumstances where he says, look, I have witnesses, you can bring it. But if they ruled that the capital punishment, it was done the next day.
Right.
There was no delay.
Yeah.
Meaning justice was done right there and then. Right. Took him out there. They said, anybody here have anything to add? If some of the judges who convicted then later switched their minds to acquittal, they accepted it.
Oh.
If you acquitted, you could not change your mind.
Oh, interesting.
Once you voted acquittal, that was it. If you voted to condemn and then said, no, forget it. Hold it, we rethought it, let's go back.
That's interesting.
That's then, even if he brought witnesses at even after conviction, and they threw some doubt, and then the rabbis then said, you know what?
We'll go through.
That's interesting, because that's kind of like the appeals process and the concept of double jeopardy,
right?
In modern law.
But one of the things I want to ask you about is the method of punishment, because all of my boys did this. They would study these books when they were younger, like in elementary school, and they would learn all the laws of the Torah, and they had to know every single punishment for every single law. Do you remember when they were doing that? Yeah. And so I had to memorize
that sounds fun.
Whatever, these 4 methods of capital punishment. There was stoning, hanging. I don't know what they were.
Hanging.
Oh, not hanging. No, I only know them in Hebrew.
Suffocating.
Oh, suffocating.
They would just choke him to death.
What's skila?
Oh my God.
Skila is stoning.
Stoning. Strafe. What's
strafe? Is burning.
Oh, burning.
But burning is not burning. It's not an auto da fe where you tie the guy to sticks.
Oh.
They heated up this hot thing of lead. And they opened his mouth and they poured the lead down, and that instantly.
I'm glad I only knew it in Hebrew.
It killed him.
My Lord.
And then their decapitation.
Right.
All of these are instantaneous.
Right.
There's no lingering around. The Sreifat, he died instantly. They probably also they said they gave him some booze beforehand, so he was out of sorts. And then the skila was pushing him and then stoning him. He died instantly, and of course the strangulation just killed him instantly.
Oh my God!
But again, it was unusual, rarely ever done. So there was many rabbis who never even could have been sitting on the court for 30, 40 years, never experienced anything like this.
So wait, and one last thing.
Sure.
If somebody was not convicted of murder, but everyone knew that they did a murder, what would happen to them?
So there was like I mentioned, there were extrajudicial powers that the king had in the time of temple, where the king could take him and put him in this room where they wouldn't feed him except water, and then he would just die. He would die. So you got rid of him, but you didn't do it you didn't do it the formal way. You did the informal way.
You called the mafia.
There were cases. I'm going to go into each detail where if a priest did something in the temple, it's not a capital offense, but young priests were allowed to take him to the back of the temple and murder him.
Oh.
There were some instances. Yeah. I mean, a lot of because there's a lot of death in the Bible. You may have noticed there's a lot of death in the Bible. So we're not against death, by the way, not against death, but the formal process of putting someone to death from a court's point of view. And Maimonides also writes that it wasn't only in capital. If a guy just kept, not even like Shabbos, but he just kept walking in the street eating bacon, let's say, for example, and he was warned over and over again, don't eat the bacon, it's prohibited by the Torah. And remember, this is a spiritual society that's run by the Torah. It's not a democracy. This is a theocracy.
Right.
The rules of the Torah are pertinent then, and the guy just kept doing it, and he wouldn't listen.
Right.
So they gave him lashes, and then he did it again, and he gave him lashes a second time, and they kept warning him. After a while, Maimonides said the community had a right to just put him away and just because he was flaunting it.
Right.
He was flaunting it. So this is all part of Bi'ar Tahara, of getting of removing the evil from within you.
Right.
No, so that's
okay.
so like
it's an interesting example because it really does play into the concept of forgiveness and true repentance, because if you're flaunting it and you're repeatedly saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and then doing it again. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I ate the bacon, and then doing it again.
I don't care.
And you do repeatedly. It's the society has the right to say that's enough.
You have to make a decision. The society had to make a decision. So if a guy was saying, "Look, you know what? I love bacon, so I just can't help myself." That's one circumstance. So eat the bacon at home. But if a guy came to shul on Yom Kippur and sitting in front of the shul with a bacon sandwich, a glass of milk, and a cigar, wearing leather shoes and no yarmulke, and the rabbi says, "Hey, it's Yom Kippur," and he just blows you off and says, "I don't care." That's a whole different story. So there already, he put himself in that position. It wasn't society forced him into that position.
Intention matters.
Look, there are people that have these issues with pornography, have issues with gambling, have issues. Society took it into consideration. I mean, if you have these tremendous urges, if you do it privately, all right. But if you're flaunting it, I mean, I tell you, please, it is prohibited from having relations with you can't marry a non-Jewish woman. And back in the biblical times, a Jew is supposed to marry a Jew, and he keeps walking the street and dating the shiksas, what we call them, You put yourself in that position. Why are you complaining now?
Right.
And then you come to me and you say, "Rabbi, why are they doing this to me? Why?"
So now let's turn to 2024.
Okay.
And knowing what you know about Jewish law and knowing what you know about the Torah and what justice is, how do you think about capital punishment in the context of our country today?
So I would say most rabbinical organizations, certainly the Reform and Conservative, have come out against capital punishment. That's nothing to talk about.
Right.
Okay. Orthodoxy has, for the most part, I would say the Orthodox Union, come out against capital punishment because there are flaws in our system.
Right.
It's not because we're against capital punishment per se, the issue.
Right.
That may be we can do. But because the justice system, the way it's adjudicated here in America today, there are so many mistakes and so many things that could go wrong that the Orthodox Union put out a paper saying that if the judicial system would reform, and they gave a whole list of stuff that needs to be done, then we could consider being pro-capital punishment. But until that time, we can't. One of the things is the inconsistencies.
Right.
You can have a judge in Boston and you can have a judge in Alabama. There are two different people. Right. And you end up in front of the judge in Boston and you're free. And then you end up in a judge in Alabama with you're a black man, in Alabama with a white sheriff. Right. And I'm not trying to stereotype.
No.
But
it's a real issue.
And your chances of them hanging you,
or if you get stuck with a public defender, not that they're not amazing, but a public defender has 100 cases at a time, whereas like a fancy lawyer, is going to put all the energy into you.
Because there's so many, inconsistencies in American judicial system, and because mistakes are made, there's no question. We have this organization,
Aleph,
not Aleph, that they visit the criminals, but there is this organization of law students and law professors that look at cases. I forgot just the names.
Like the Innocence Projects.
The Innocence Projects. Thank you. Innocence Project. And they go through case after case after case, Now, sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not successful, but they've shown how, these people were railroaded.
Yeah.
The cops want a conviction. They withhold evidence. Yeah. The prosecution doesn't give everything for discovery.
Or the witnesses are lying.
Or they put out witnesses. Yeah. They create witnesses. Yeah. So it looks good. It looks
so what should happen? I mean, there is one exception, I think, and we kind of talked about it. I think there is one exception. Like, what do you do about someone like Timothy McVeigh or somebody like or I don't know, someone who's committing what you would call a crime against humanity? I mean, like, is that?
I think now,
is that different?
Unless you have, let's take Israel for example.
Okay,
Israel is not a theocracy. Israel is a democracy.
Right.
Israel is a democracy. Israel has, from 1948 to today, killed 2 people. Adolf Eichmann, because it's crimes against humanity, and 1 Jewish traitor in 1948.
Oh.
They hung him.
Wow.
Okay? Later on, this individual, the case was brought again, and they exonerated him.
Oh.
Okay? They exonerated him. Because, so right now in Israel, there is no capital punishment.
Right.
Even for terrorism. When you think about it, even for terrorism. Now, the Knesset, from every once in a while, the right-wingers are going to come and propose that we should have capital punishment for terrorists and this and that. It's generally voted down.
Right.
Now, think about that for a second. In Israel, you have terrorism and times where, the guy goes into a home, kills a father, a mother, 3 kids. You catch the guy.
Right.
The police catch him. Sahel catches him. The army catches him. And yet, Israel is still very, very, very reluctant of implementing a capital punishment system. This comes back to bite them because you have murderers that are now sitting in jail.
Right.
That
Sinwar. You have Sinwar.
Sinwar.
Yeah.
You have Bourgadi. They're sitting in jail, and with the chance that someday we're going to make a deal and they're going to get out. But like the Talmud says, I'd rather 1,000 people go innocent than 1 innocent person gets put to death. So here in America, it kind of is the same ideology where, until the system is foolproof, that we know that everyone is going to get the same type of, consistency, that, whether you're a poor Black person living in Mississippi or you're a rich guy on Wall Street, you are going to get the same representation.
Right.
Not that one guy gets, F. Lee Bailey and Johnny Cochran and then Alan Dershowitz. And the other one gets, some Schmeckelberg, the guy.
It's funny. Last night, actually, I was thinking about our episode about hostages from a few weeks back when we were talking about how do you prevent hostage taking, and we talked about making the punishment of that, or making the ramifications of taking hostages so unbearable that no one would ever take hostages again. And last night I was watching a documentary on Entebbe, and I was thinking about that case and how they took the Israeli and Jewish hostages to get some number of terrorists out of prison. And it crossed my mind. This is a little bit of an aside. This isn't directly related to what we're talking to, but it's sort of tangentially related, I think. And it got me thinking, what if after they had freed the hostages, they had then gone and taken all of the all the terrorists that they had asked to get out and killed them all?
Right. Yeah.
Then
that's
then you would never have a situation again where they would ask for prisoners released, because if the response was the prisoners you asked to be released, we're going to kill, I mean, it's almost a guarantee that would never happen again. But again, we've talked about, what's the price of civilization?
Right.
The thing is, we're dealing with two different. We're dealing with two different issues here.
I know.
One is emotional and one is rational.
Right.
You know which system never had to deal with hostages? The Nazis.
Right.
They never had to deal.
Right.
You never had a case where we're holding a Nazi hostage and you're going to release 10,000 Jews from Auschwitz. We don't see one case. You know why? Because the Nazis didn't care. Kill him.
Right.
Because kill him. I don't care.
Right.
You got Himmler, so what?
Right.
There's 10 Himmlers behind him. There's 10 Eichmanns behind him. Who do I care? Not only don't we care, we'll take the 10,000 people that you asked for and hang, like what Jay said, we'll hang them. Here's our response.
Right.
So you have to figure, if you want to live in that kind of a society where the terror is so overwhelming that no one is going to do anything, you're right. You're absolutely correct. No one is going to budge. Had Israel gone in the first day into Gaza and indiscriminately committed genocide the way genocide is supposed to be done, get Hitler's playbook, and do that. Yeah. Believe me, we'd have the hostages back.
Right.
All you needed to do was take 500 people and hang him.
That's right, but Israel would never do that.
Now, who could do that?
Right.
So
Americans can do that. Israel can do that. Western Europe can do that.
Yeah.
We can't do that.
So you mean when you're committing genocide, the populations don't increase of the of the civilizations?
Israel is so good at everything except genocide. They're so bad at genocide.
Terrible.
Wait, to get back to our conversation about capital punishment, because one of the things, one of the things that I think about a lot is that, we're so caught up in like mental health, and we think about everybody's mental health. And I find myself, like, anytime a crime is committed or somebody, I'm always like, oh, but they must have had a terrible childhood. And I think I was like groomed from a young age, in the culture that I was raised in, that's how we think about the world, right? Like, we never think about the fact that the person made a choice that morning and, took a gun or whatever it was and committed that crime. How does Judaism, I know this is a big question and we only have a few more minutes, but like, how does that play into a crime or the criminal mindset of a person? Like, is that something that the Torah tells us we should think about? Or
think about this. When I mentioned before the person committed the crime,
Yeah.
he had to acknowledge that a crime is being made.
right,
If the person didn't acknowledge, if he was completely out of his mind,
right,
then it wouldn't work. The
Right.
whole system doesn't work. Like a crime of passion. He's so angry
Right.
that he doesn't listen to you. He's not acknowledging. He doesn't know, and he doesn't do it, and still commits the murder. He would not be put to death.
right.
You couldn't. This guy that Jay mentioned before in the morning, that this murderer that burned the lady.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lawyer that's going to get up there
Yeah.
and is going to argue that this guy is insane.
Right.
And he should not spend time in prison because no sane person does this.
Right.
Which sane person goes
So what is-
and lights another person on fire?
Is that a legitimate argument in your mind?
You'll have to ask the jury that.
Right, I just
they'll
don't-
look at him. They'll ask him. They'll interview him.
I know what Jay thinks.
They'll put him on. They'll put him on the stand. All he needs is a good good
know, but
lawyer.
I don't think
and
that's
then he's going to get the jury to believe that this guy
Right.
came from Guatemala, whatever he came from, had a horrible life.
But shouldn't that person, even if they had the most cruel upbringing and the worst mental health and blah, 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 like, shouldn't there still be a punishment for them? I mean, even if all that is true, maybe it's a different type of, maybe it's not the same jail, maybe it's a mental hospital, or maybe it's a psych ward.
We'll go to this guy, John Hinckley,
Right.
who tried to assassinate President Reagan.
Right.
And he was deeply in love with Jodie Foster,
Right.
and he was crazy about Jodie Foster, and he was crazy. So they put him away for. I think he's out. I mean, I think
No, is
Yeah.
he?
He's out. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
he's out. He
Oh,
spent
he's out.
30
He's doing a music tour.
Oh, God.
There you go.
Yeah.
Here's a perfect case of a guy that spent time. He was found to be insane. Who goes shoots the president and writes love letters to Jodie Foster.
I think
and
there's something
yet
in
Saran,
right.
the killer of Bobby Kennedy, is still in prison. Good. I mean, I'm thrilled,
Right.
but he's still in prison.
I think there's something interesting that we didn't touch upon, and we don't have to get deep into it, but there's something interesting that Judaism teaches us, because even if someone kills someone by accident in Jewish law, right? So a mistake happened, you know, whatever, it was not intentional, by accident, you murdered someone, you still have to pay a price. It's not the kind of punishment that you go to jail or that you get killed, but you have to leave your home, you have to run away to a city that's outside of the camp. I mean, there's a whole system. That tells me that a person is always responsible for their actions, even if there was no intention, you know, like behind it. And it wasn't meant to be that, you didn't mean it to happen, but somehow you were chosen
for whatever reason God had, you were chosen to commit that crime and to murder that person, or unintentionally, not murder, to unintentionally kill that person. I think there's something very powerful about that you have to do some kind of tikkun, even if you didn't mean it, right? I mean, shouldn't that apply in some way? I don't know how that applies in modern law. I don't know how we would be able to adjudicate such a thing, but I think there's something very powerful about that. Oh, here we go.
There you go.
I'm making a really good point right now, and you have to ruin it. Wow. The two of you do not care about my point.
It's not true. I listened to your point very carefully, and it's a very legitimate thing. But it's all based upon, again, a society that believes, when a society starts to fall apart, like at the time of the Second Temple era, when murder was rampant, there's nothing but the rabbis can do. Even you wanted to adjudicate a murder case, you couldn't adjudicate. If all the people are worshiping idols, you can run around and you can do nothing. This is all based upon, the Torah is based upon the most perfect system. Meaning that people care about each other, people worry about each other, they care about righteousness, they care about justice, they care about God. They're a wonderful, perfect situation. And then, if someone slips and, like he's climbing up a ladder and he drops the paint and someone comes under him and the paint falls and it kills him. Yes, that person needs to go. But if it's completely without, if it's completely a complete accident, he doesn't have to go. I mean, if he doesn't, but if he's chopping wood and the axe, the head flies off and kill somebody, you should have been more careful. Now, we can't give capital punishment because it was unintentional, but you're going to pay a price because this is the way God wants.
It's also that
but here in America,
I know, but we also are talking about the person who committed the crime, but there's also the part about the family, of the victim who needs some kind of justice. And I think what Jay was talking about in the beginning is really like about that idea that woman who was murdered deserves some kind of, really some kind of justice. And
it's interesting that Jay started with that. I thought Jay was going to bring up a completely different case.
Oh, wow.
I did not know he was going to bring up the case of I thought he was going to bring up that President Biden commuted 37 deaths.
Well,
that is another discussion, okay? Because the president has a right to do that. The federal, not the state, but the federal people that are under the death and under the death penalty, the president has a right to commute them. So out of the 40 that are presently under the system, he commuted 37.
But they're still going to stay in jail.
They're still staying in jail without parole, but not going to be So I was thinking today about the families. Because, the families were very angry. They said, what, he killed the loved one, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's an argument, okay, what was the purpose of doing this? Many of them would not even have gone to the death penalty. You die in prison way before you even get to the death penalty. But because we are a country that gives the president this right, you say to the families, listen, you know what? We feel for you, but this is.
Well, that's a whole other discussion, because the fact that without getting too much in a political discussion about it, the fact that he pardons 37 of them, and the 3 he didn't pardon are the 3 most politically charged of the people. Yeah, it was Zarniev with the marathon bombing. It was Dylan Roof, and it was the guy who committed the Tree of Life shootings. So those are the 3 he didn't pardon. Well, if the principle is that you don't believe in death penalty, then you would have pardoned all of them.
Right.
Yeah. But the fact that he didn't, then it shows it was political. And if you read some of the cases of what some of those people did, it's equally as horrific as what these other people crimes is committed.
I did a little research before. Do you know that only 28 states have the death penalty in our country? Over 80% of U.S. counties have never put anyone to death at all. So it's like very rare, actually, that in most places. And the country with the most executions is China by far. They have the most by far. And Europe has none. I mean, there's no capital punishment in Europe. None of the
even the Nordic guy who shot up that day camp.
Right.
25, 30 years ago, he's out. He's out, I believe. He didn't get death penalty. He only got like 25 years in jail. He's out, I think.
But we have a lot of people on death row.
Yeah,
it's not federal, but state. We have a lot of people on death row. I think the United States has the most people on death row of any, Western country. I know about it's Thailand or these countries, but here in the Western civilization, America has the most people on death row.
Yeah,
it's a tough topic, but I would say, like, at the end of the day, from the Torah's perspective, not from the American tradition, not a political, but Torah's perspective, unless the justice system is fair and equal, and we can, really feel confident that justice is being served.
Yeah,
I think you have to be cautious on the side of putting someone's life.
This is probably another topic for another episode that I want to talk to you about. That I've been thinking a lot about is public corruption.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
It exists.
I've read about it. I don't think it really exists, but in theory,
no one's ever tried to bribe me. Why?
We were talking about the Biden pardons, and I was just thinking about that previous to the murderers, that judge from Pennsylvania who had the kids for cash thing. So we should do that on a later episode of public corruption. That's So before we sign off, though, we want to announce the next book club book.
That's right.
And when we told the rabbi the book, I thought his eyes were going to pop out of his head. So it's a book that I read a few years ago that I love, and I think is actually going to be a very interesting conversation. It's Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and I am telling you, I think it's going to be there's some very deep philosophical issues in that book, and I think it'll be a very good discussion. So Frankenstein, we'll link to it in the Substack, and so that'll be about a month from now. Let's talk about Frankenstein by Mary Shelley.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
See you guys.
Bye.
Take care.